In this very special UN Women Day, I would like to just emphasize on the role of women in their fight against the COVID. So we've seen women that has been on the front line just as men, and even more, because we know that in the health profession particularly, there is more women than men. So for instance, we know that in the MENA region particularly, there is, for every 8 females working in the healthcare, there is 1 man or 2 men. Of course, the health sector is one. There's also teachers, scientists, traders, and even in the decision making as well. So it's very important that we realize the importance of women in this sense, that how they are contributing as well as, or even more than men in the fight against this. For the South Mediterranean countries in particular, equality between men and women is one of the lowest in the world. So according to the UN report, gender inequality index for these countries ranks between 65 for Tunisia, for instance, and 111 for Morocco. And this is over about 189 countries. So it's quite high, even from before the COVID. Also, the South Mediterranean countries have one of the highest unemployment, female unemployment in the world. It's about 21%. Compared to only 5% for like the general average. And this is really, really high, especially if we know that education of female has increased dramatically, which is great news, but this has not been translated into women wanting to join the labor force, unfortunately. And then we have to think about why. Why don't they? They're well educated, but they don't join the labor force. Female participation also is, which is a bit different from unemployment, is also highest in the world. It's about 21%. Even when we compare it to Latin America or Sub-Saharan Africa, they compare really, really, really negatively. And one can think about traditions and culture that could make women think, no, I better stay home, or the way that some communities think that women should stay home, which is quite respected actually. But even women who are working at home, they are unpaid, obviously, because they take care of their children, they work in their household. All this is not taken into account when we look at the participation of women in the labor market. If you look at the income of women, we found that on average, one of the FEMISE research found that on average, what estimated for the South Mediterranean countries that women receive 37% lower average than men for the same position. And also we found out that even though women prefer to go to the public sector in the South Med region for reasons such as having fixed contracts, having facilities, flexibility in their working hours, maternity leaves, which will enable them to take care of their children. However, most women are obliged to go to the private sector, which is great. However, the private sector doesn't give the same type of instant incentives, and they are a bit more biased sometimes to hire men because their requirements or their demands is not very high. So in countries like Egypt, for instance, the private sector represents about 2/3 of females. In a country like Morocco, is about 90%. So quite high a number of female work in the private sector. Also, it's in another researcher by FEMISE, it was found that the region has the highest proportions of women that are unpaid. They have unpaid jobs. Unpaid jobs are just like childcare, elderly care, agriculture care, and this is a job. I mean, yes, of course, they don't expect to be rewarded for it. However, it's important to be included in the data so as to evaluate the contribution of women in the community. Also, another research by FEMISE suggests that the informal employment is quite high, which is obviously something we all know. However, female represent 2/3 of the informal employment in the region, which is quite high as well. First, there are short-term recommendations. And this is like how the governments are tackling the COVID in the South Mediterranean countries particularly. Some governments are giving cash transfers or giving unemployment benefits. However, we noticed that this is not equally distributed between men and women. So for instance, in Jordan, only 1.2% of female-headed households received aid compared to 5.9% of male. Also in Morocco and Egypt, unemployment benefits are not even matching the minimum wage in these countries. So the governments are doing efforts, but maybe it's not enough. Also, if we can, there are some policies that could change that will encourage women to go back to the labor force. Some flexibility in the hours, in the working hours, some part-time programs, increasing childcare burden during the pandemic has, of course, made a lot of women not participate. Also, we can give some incentives to the employers who hire women and encourage women entrepreneurship. This is a very important impact because this means that women will have their own flexible time, they will be able to have their own business, and this will increase their participation and let them be able also to handle their household at the same time. Safety for women, whether in the workforce or during transportation, public transportation. Some of the recommendation is to have women-only buses, for instance, that will enable women and encourage them to go back or to participate in the labor market. Where public jobs are not available at the moment, I think it's better, it's good for the private sector to be more encouraging for women to participate. In the long run, regulations needs to be revised to encourage women and to avoid all discrimination in terms of income and in terms of hiring and firing. Informal market, as we said, a lot of women work in the informal market, so it will be good to have incentives for these women to join in the formal market and have the benefits of the formal markets like insurances and solid income, etc. Why not, for instance, have paternity leaves? This will make women able to participate more in the labor market and will not have any discrimination against women, because when they take maternity leaves now, the father as well might have the paternity leave. And then encouraging women to join new sectors post-COVID, like digital sector, which is becoming really, really interesting and booming. And of course, trying to put in policies to avoid domestic abuse, like putting in hotlines, shelters for women who unfortunately receive these abuses. So there's many, many policies that we can put in to help women and encourage them to go back to the labor markets. And FEMISE has done quite a few, as I just mentioned, researchers on this. And we are very happy to publish those 2 policy briefs, which I've used some of the input information from to give more emphasis on the post-COVID area and impact on women.